All right, well, welcome everyone. Today is our October 16th Lodging Tax Advisory Commission meeting. We will do a quick roll call because we have someone online, it looks like. Margaret, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Oh, okay. Why don't we just go down the line, just say hello, your name.
Dana McCullough, Oak Harbor Chamber of Commerce.
Alana Jenkins, Whidbey Playhouse.
Brian Stuckey, City of Oak Harbor.
Susan Bowles Simmons, Candlewood Suites.
Joanna Hennessy, Coachman Inn.
Pamela Estes, Best Western Plus.
Wonderful. Well, everyone is here and Margaret is remote. Could we get a quick approval of the agenda? Any suggested changes? It all looks pretty easy. Is there anyone that would like to make a change? No? All right, seeing none. Approval of the minutes. Any minutes? Do we need to approve those? Did we get a chance to look? Were those emailed in advance? Yeah. Can a
I
motion-
move that we approve the minutes as written.
Second. All right. The second. All right. All in favor, raise your hand. Okay. Public comment. This is a public meeting. We're open to public comments. Any members of the public who would like to make a comment? No. Okay. That brings us on to our different funding options. Wendy, did you want me to just kind of dive into it? Okay. So remember, these are kind of suggested options. We can certainly modify them if we'd like. We have 1, 2, and 3, and I don't know if we have the ability to put these on the screen at all. Yeah, we'll start with 1. I'll kind of give the mentality behind it and what they are, and then we can certainly discuss. So the first one, and I apologize for the comically big sheets here, basically took the average, and we tried doing it. Last year we removed the top and the bottom score. That was mostly because back then people were making their own score. So for example, the chamber would also be rating the chambers, and I thought that wasn't correct. And occasionally we'll have someone who puts a really low score, and it kind of helped to equalize things out. But if you look at the rank order, if we remove the top and the bottom score, or we just leave it with an average, the rank pretty much stays the same. So the first option, I took all of the ones, and everything that was below the average, just put 0. This is kind of the straight to the point option. It would then give more funding for all of those that are above the average. Because do remember, we have quite a bit of a shortfall in what has applied. So that's option 1. Option 2, we took out, or I took out, we have 2 outliers basically. We have 2 outliers on the top and 2 outliers on the bottom. What I mean by that is if you look at the scores, and you'll notice the music festival and the marathon are scored much higher than all the others. So those are the 2 top outliers. And the 2 bottom outliers we have are the Whidbey Island Disc Golf Club and the Rotary Club of Oak Harbor. So what I did is I took the 2 outliers on the bottom and just said no funding. And then I kind of staggered this based on the funding requested. So for example, the 2 outliers at the top are at 95%, but after that I staggered it by how much they requested. So if you look at, say, Working on Whidbey, which requested the most, they're funded at 45%. Same with the Chamber of Oak Harbor at 45%. So those requesting more than 30,000 were at that level. And then 10,000 to 30,000 are at 50% requested level. And those under 10,000 are at 80% requested level. That kind of helps to equalize the funding a little bit, because otherwise we're going by a rating. Say, Working on Whidbey, they requested 75,000, they would get a huge chunk, if that makes sense. So that one's based mostly on how much requested funding, what percent they get. The third option is going straight with what scores they have and only taking into effect the scores, not how much they requested. So using Working on Whidbey again as an example, where are they? So, for example, this one, they scored a 75. Based on the average score, they would get 60,000. on the option 3. So it's not taking into effect how much they applied for, just going strictly on their score. So option 1, to the point. Option 2, ranked based on how much they applied for. And option 3 is just taking their total score and divvying out the funds we have based on those scores. We did look at the possibility of attempting to get more funds released by the city council for this go-around. We had some trouble getting a definitive answer. We kind of got some conflicting things, so getting more funding this go-around is not an option at this time. It probably will be for next year. We also have 3-year grants that we award that are up after this year. So next year would be, it makes sense to release more funding. So those are our options. And now we deliberate. Any thoughts? Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you pushed green button means,
Okay. So on option 3, where it says difference in the red, it's 88,224. Can you explain that?
I can't hear a microphone.
so on the left, the 182,365, that would be if we have awarded everything to everybody. That's how much we'd be short. The 88,224, Wendy, would you be able to help elaborate on that? She's looking underneath the 70 plus to 80% funding.
Right, so if, the way that it has been awarded in the past is, basically we had enough funding to provide anybody who, was 70% in the scoring and above, they got 80% of the funding. So if we went with that model, it still leaves us with an $88,000 deficit. So we have to decrease the awards by another $88,000. So basically, it would discount the bottom 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 associations, organizations, and then of the ones that are in the third column that say average score of 70% and or above that, you'd need to find another $88,000 to decrease the awards by. Does that make sense?
So if we took the 60% to 70% and we just did away with those, kind of like option 1, that's 87,500. We need to find 88,224, so it would be close. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes.
Okay. It is definitely a difficult job we have compared to years past. I mean, either we say everyone below that average gets nothing, or we try to spread it out. And the question for some of these applicants, which we don't have firm answers to, are can some of these events still happen at a quarter of this funding, at half of this funding? And then that's the difficulty we run into.
Can I make a comment?
Oh, Margaret, okay. Yes, please do, Margaret.
I just wanted to say that option number 1 is, I think, is out off the books. I don't think that's right. I don't like that one.
And I'll be honest, I didn't like it either. I put it in there just to kind of show a little bit of the situation, to be honest. I don't like option 1 either. I just put that in there so there was a couple of different ways to look at it. I mean, personally, option 2 is the one I kind of spent the most time on. I don't love any of these options based on the funding we have, but we have a hard decision to make. So 2 is kind of what I was pushing for. I understand it's a little confusing with the tiered system, but happy to debate or, change things around too. So.
I have a question. On option number 2, you were saying that it was based off of the amount asked, and that it looks like Whidbey Island Marathon was asking in that $30,000, but was still awarded 95%.
Yeah, so let me try to take one more stab at this. So we have 2 outliers at the top, which are the Whidbey Island Marathon and the Oak Harbor Music Festival. I originally had those at 100%, but I really had to finagle the numbers to get this to where we need to be. So I gave those all as close to the full amount as I could. And then from there, it is staggered by dollar amount, with the exception of the bottom 2 outliers to receive nothing. So working on Whidbey and Chamber requesting the most would get 45%. The next tier 50%, 80%, you can, so on and so forth, you can see there. So I was trying my best to spread the love as much as possible, so to speak. You know, those, you know, like I said, working on Whidbey was 75,000. That's by far the biggest grant, even more than the chamber. It was the only way I could figure out to make things work.
Hello. So question, the two that aren't getting the funding at all, we have the Would-Be Golf Disc Club and the car show. What if would we be able to say take 1,500 from the marathon and the music festival and maybe give 2,000 to one and 1,000 to the other one? So it's maybe a little something?
We can. I think my only thought process was, especially because one of those is way off, I worry about the precedent of doing that, of, okay, is that going to be expected next year? And then the year after. We could do that for this round, but then again, next round, you know, we get 25 applicants. Well, we want to make sure everyone gets something. And then 30 applicants. We want to make sure everyone gets something. You know, if they were close, I mean, if you look at the Whidbey Island Disc Club, you know, not to speak negative about the project, it's a great project, but I assume most of us thought, how does this relate to tourism? At least that's how I looked at it. And when I look how far of an outlier that is, I had difficulty rationalizing giving them a part. But you're right, that's why we're here. And yes, we can and make that suggestion to City Council, yes.
I had a comment.
Please.
For the disc golf, my trouble with that one is that they're looking for a sign for a park that's a city park, not for a project. And it was my thought that if it's a city park, maybe the city ought to pay for the sign.
Yep, I can understand that mentality.
My other thought on that particular project was there would be no knowledge of this sign until you were already in town. And I don't think anyone's traveling off of, or from off island to Oak Harbor to see the sign. The park and the project itself are great, but in terms of tourism, that link is just not there, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's difficult because, you know, remember these are lodging tax grants. The idea is to bring people off island and do hotel stays, which some of that is a little difficult for them to report on. You know, working on Whidbey, at least for me, I was like, oh, I could see how this could help tourism. It's going to be difficult when they have to report at the end of the year of how that increased hotel stays tangibly. But that's on them to justify that when it comes for reimbursement.
So at the end of the year, these guys have to report and show that they brought in tourism, right? If they can't do that, they don't get the grant money? Is that how that works?
I can answer that, but Wendy, you might be able to answer that better than I.
Could you ask that again?
So we give them the funding, and at the end of the year, they have to show how they used it, and then it brought in tourism, heads and beds, right? So if they can't do that, do they not get the funding? How does that work?
No, we provide the funding. They provide, the recipients have to provide receipts, and then they just have to provide a report back to us, which is 6 to 8 questions, which then we turn around and we report to the state. The JLARC, which is the Joint Legislative, I can't remember the terminology for it. So there's no threshold.
Yeah, so there's reporting how stringent that reporting is, and those are state requirements, as I understand correctly. Yeah. So if I'm reading the room right, it sounds like option one, none of us like. Again, I didn't like it either. I just wanted to put it out there. So I guess it comes down to, do we want to compare option 2 to option 3, or do we want to just stick with option 2 and maybe either prove that or finagle the numbers a little bit more? I know it can be difficult when we're trying to get on a certain threshold and this number affects this number. And
I am not a fan of option 2, personally. I think that there is a more equitable way to go about it in option 3.
So if we're discussing option 3, then are you for, because option 3, we got some money to find, and if we eliminate those that are between 60 and 70%, then that more closely mirrors option 1.
I don't think it necessarily has to be an elimination, but I think finding $88,000 within all of the 17 applicants is a more feasible task, I guess.
Brian,
Yeah.
this is Margaret. I like option 2. My problem with options 3 is I do not think that a first time out there grant deserves $60,000.
And I would say my thoughts kind of mirror yours. The trick is, of course, we're making a recommendation to city council, and then we have to justify this to city council. It can be a little difficult. This is what I was struggling with when they scored relatively high, but we're going to say, despite that score, we feel that money's better elsewhere. That could be difficult. We can make the proposal, but it's up to city council to approve that. And if they're going by scores and aren't necessarily watching this meeting and the discussion, that may be a little difficult. But I understand where you are coming from.
To your question that you posed at the very beginning of this is, can some of these events or projects move forward without the entirety funding that they're asking for? And I do know that working on Whidbey project, while it's absolutely fantastic, and I really do think that the work that they're doing is fantastic, that cost isn't for one episode, and so the project could still continue to move forward without a full award. But I do understand kind of also the precedent that you're setting with, these were the score sheets, this is where it landed, but at the same time, not awarding all that they were asking for, or even in alignment with some of the other people that were scoring about the same.
This is Margaret again. I like option number 2, even though my organization is not funded in the amount that it was even funded for last year. But I think overall option 2 would probably be the best.
I agree.
I agree. I like option 2 the best out of the 3 myself.
Yeah, I think option 2's our best too.
I do think if we look at option 2, working with Whidbey, we gave them $33,000. If you just did $33,000 on option 3, that brings it down $30,000, which gets us closer. We only would need 50 to find. And again, great event. I hear what you're saying about first time out. But if we're looking at 2 to 3, that's a big jump from 30 to 60.
But doesn't that also get back to the problem with the points and how it's not going to be?
It
There's
does.
that
I mean,
discrepancy.
now that being said, we can take that and we can go to city council and I can help convey that thought process and they may approve it. We don't have to go based on a score, but it's certainly easier for them to digest that because they can deny our recommendation and send it back to us. So it's not that they can't approve it, it's just trying to rationalize it.
But if the whole thing's based on scoring,
We're basing it on scoring because I think that's probably what the most equitable thing to do is to take the score into consideration. We're not required to do so, but it makes the most sense to do so.
but if we're not gonna base it on scoring, then why score them?
Yep. I understand. I understand.
And if we're basing on scoring, we have to base on scoring across the board for all of them, not just a few and the others not. Then that would be a completely different problem.
I think the hard part too, though, is a precedent that we're setting when we base it off of the score and the amount asked. Then what happens next year when not me, if an organization is like, well, I know I'm going to get a percentage of what I asked for, so I'm asking for $200,000.
And I agree. However, that could take place no matter how you did it as well. I mean, if you did the scoring, I mean, it could, I mean, that's just what you hope that those applicants are asking for what they actually need, or at least in the ballpark of what you actually need. Because even if we took, option 3, it's still based on a percentage of the ask. So you do get into that either way. You would hope that people would not, that really need $50,000 would be applying for $50,000 or close, not for $250,000 hoping for $100,000.
This is Margaret again. If you take scores into account, but if you also look at their P&Ls and their balance sheets that they send in, some of the organizations have plenty of money and others do not. So how do you put that into the equation as well?
I agree. And that's kind of like with option 2, I took, again, I think we can all agree you've got 2 that are way up here, 2 at the bottom here. And then all the other ones are relatively close. So while option 2 doesn't take strictly score, it does take dollar amount asked as well. But yes, I understand. They're all good points. Again, this is not an easy decision by any means. And you do wonder how many of these need them and how many are saying, hey, there's dollars available, why not try? And everyone's going to fight for their project, of course. Other thoughts? Other thoughts or emotion?
So just an FYI too, I have the spreadsheet number 3 up on my computer live, and there's one column that's the committee consensus. So if you want to start throwing out numbers for changes, I can plug those in to see where that would end up at the bottom line too, if you want to start going down that route.
Sure. So, I mean, at this point, we can either motion 2, or we can take a look at 3 and work to finagle the numbers a little bit.
I motion 2 option.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, at this time, we can, before we take the final vote, if there's any further discussion on it, now would be the time. Seeing none, all in favor, raise your hand or say aye. All opposed? Margaret, was that a yes? All opposed? Okay. Motion passes. So thank you, everyone, for that. I know this is not an easy decision. It still goes to City Council for the final approval. I see on the agenda next meeting, but that's not something we need to worry about at this point. If for some reason the City Council rejects the proposal, then we would meet again. But otherwise, I thank you all for your time and putting into this, and hopefully we'll see